Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 10th episode of Move for a Movement. I have today Katina McClain, the lovely Katina. Katina is a Boston area-based educator and dance educator and founder and director of Danko Productions, which we'll get into that, what you do. Thank you so much for being here, Katina.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Absolutely. So, jumping off, Danko uses performing arts and fitness as an educational empowerment tool for healing. So, how and why do you see the performing arts and fitness as poised to educate, empower, and heal?
Well, thank you again for having me. And I think that's such a great question because I think that's one of the things that makes it so hard when I explain to people what it is that I do. They're like, what is it that you do? And I've been involved in the performing arts since I was about 8 years old, starting out playing music and then dancing and theater. And I also started out playing sports as a 5-year-old. So really that's what I know. And being involved in athletics and various forms of arts was really at various times very therapeutic, but it also allowed me to engage and interact with different people in different communities. And I just kind of felt like that was kind of one of the gifts that I was giving, was being able to bring people together. And so I'm able to use, my performing arts background, my fitness and wellness background that I have. And there's just something about, they're very just, the arts in general are very just therapeutic. And I feel like it's just a way for one to find their own voice, their own place in the world. And I, in some kind of weird way, have been able to fuse all these things together. And I think it's probably because of my work as an educator too, for almost 20 years, working with very young little guys from like 2.5 to, seniors and everything in between, people with intellectual and physical disabilities and challenges, so I just love people. And so I've just kind of been able to use those to just bring people together. So it's been really lovely.
Amazing. It's interesting, the tie between performing arts, dance at least, more particularly, and sports. It's all movement and it's all something that can unify, right? Yeah, that's interesting how maybe that connection could be explored more. I don't know. Yeah. So also very interesting with what you do, your shows include various art forms, theater, music, fashion shows, slam poetry, all these kind of art forms that you do bring together. So it does really go beyond dance. So that's, you have a company of dancers, like a circle of people who dance for you. And there are those connections. So what to you are the challenges and benefits of creating those really eclectic programs and making those connections?
I think the challenge is just explaining to people what it is that I do, because it's like, usually people want like a 1 or a 2 word sentence. And because it's a collaborative, performance wellness company, it's not a term that people are really familiar with. People are familiar with dance school, dance company, theater company, but I think just those combination of words, I think until you actually experience it, then when you experience it, then it all makes sense. But if you haven't experienced it, I think it's just so unique, and it's a concept that not many people have explored. But I guess that's also maybe why some people could see it as a challenge, because there are so many moving dynamics and many different pieces. I'm thinking about a project that we're working on now, where we have dancers involved, but we're also going to be bringing in kind of what I like to call like wellness specialists who have backgrounds in like Reiki, acupuncture, different other types of therapeutic ways of healing. So I'm always having to manage different groups of people. It also means too, I always have to be learning about different things. I see myself as a performing artist, primarily a dancer, actress. I'm musical. I don't really explore my music roots that much in that way, but it also forces me, now I need to learn something about these different disciplines, because I definitely see that there's a connection and it benefits the work that we're trying to do. So it allows me to always learn, which I love, and meet new people and just continue to grow our collaborative of connections in the greater Boston area, the Northeast, New England, etc.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, it's like there's musical theater and people understand that that will include music and dancing and acting.
Mhm.
But there's not so much a precedent for what you offer.
Exactly.
That could change,
That
right?
could
With
change.
what you're doing, and maybe you'll set a trend. But that's what Trailblazers do, right? They create something that's not necessarily so familiar, but something about it does resonate and it becomes a bigger thing.
Yeah,
And
I think kind of having growing up in that studio ballet competitive kind of world for so many years with dance. And I loved it. And I'm not saying anything negative about that world at all, because that's definitely where I got my base, where I got my start. But I just saw that that wasn't the route that I wanted to go long term with my career. And I was starting to experience how dance was making people feel in more of a therapeutic way, and not so much in we're trying to win trophies or different types of awards. And so that's just kind of the path that I think I was just meant to follow. So that's what I'm doing.
I love it. Yeah, I guess that segues well into my next question. So many of your works have a social or socio-political message. Whether it's let's heal together, let's have racial justice, let's work towards that and heal, or just be kind to people and just be joyful. So I'm wondering for you why it's important to speak in those ways, what that means to you, and anything else about that process that you might want to share.
Um, well, I mean, as you mentioned, I'm an artist. I'm also an educator, and artists are political people. I think just by default, because of just how how they see and they experience the world. I think sometimes is a little bit different from others, and so I think that means that they have their senses are more heightened. I think they're more empathetic, more sensitive to certain causes. Um, but also being an educator on the other side, in the words of the great Paulo Freire, education's political, and you can't be neutral. And I can definitely say, I've been an educator and public education now for 17 years, and I definitely can say, definitely the latter half of my career, I've definitely have seen how political education is. And I was really naive when I went into the field because I actually thought just the opposite. And interesting learning. It's been an interesting learning experience. But saying that those two worlds cross, educators, artists, they just merge, and politics is at the center of life in society. And that's what the job and the role of an educator is. And that's the job and the role of an artist. So by nature, I just think the work I do is just, like I said, it's political whether you think it is or not. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And so I move with that. And it's all about exercising your right to your voice. That's what we have, freedom of speech on the First Amendment, and that's just a way that you're able to do it, working as an artist.
That's so interesting that art, which does also educate, and the educational system as we know it today, or teaching, right, is political. To me, it's like those institutions were part of oppression and still are in some ways. So there's like work to be undone. And political in the sense of some people stand against that, some of our laws stand against that, and there are those tensions. Is that how you see it? Are there other sort of dynamics at work there for why you think these things that we know as the arts and education are political, as you said?
Well, I mean, I work for a public school system, and I have been very critical of that public school system, many times. And there have been many times where I've grappled if I want to stay in public education, because it is such a large system that was by design to oppress, though at various points they have opened it up to do just the opposite. But when you have that original foundation, it's really hard to kind of break that up. And I did a really interesting writing about the history of the city of Boston and how it's allowed other different groups of people to come into the public education system, starting with, the first public, school and, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I kind of digress a little bit. Sorry, I do this a lot. I start going and I'm like,
you got a lot in your brain.
so much in my brain. But being a part of the system, that's what you were asking about. And it is a very oppressive system. And it's hard to be critical of a system when you're part of a system, because then you have to think about, as much as I want to be critical of it, what role am I playing? And that's something that I'm conscious of all the time. I also am a fan of I'm also a fan of the belief, though, sometimes in order to reshape or change a system, you have to understand how it's working and who it's benefiting, who it's not, and just all the little ins and outs that keep this machine going in the way that it is. So it shouldn't be going in the way that it is, and how can you start to pull out things that can start to make it fall down, but you can slowly, hopefully, try to make it better and not completely destroy it. Though there is the argument of just totally destroying it too, and starting all over. So these are all things that I go back and forth with, and I don't know the answer. The answer that I've chosen is I've been given a really great opportunity, though, to make great art, influence a lot of youth. A story, a student that I've been working with the past 2 or 3 summers, and in a summer program that the Wayne Box Center, they operate on the City Spotlights program. And I've been a part of that for 4 years now. And a student now is a freshman in college and was reaching out to me. And I think I met him when he was 15 or 16. And, so that's why I do what I do, because, this is a student, who is just phenomenal. And I work with a lot of students where maybe they're the first in their family to go to college. And so that's also too why I stay. There are a lot of reasons to leave, but I also feel like my work does help the youth, my students. And so that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and it's an interesting tension. I feel like you pointed to there. You have to know the ins and outs, and being part of the system is the best way to know that, as well as being in the position to make change. But it's also hard if you're there to work against the system that you're part of. So yeah, that's a mouthful and a mindful, how to balance all that. But I feel like what you do is getting to that in some way, right? Using art and story, and these forms of healing and empowerment to make that change without raising too many hackles, maybe completely shutting down the system as it is. So yeah, again, trailblazer in your own way.
Very kind, very kind.
Speaking to education, you're working towards your PhD, and like you said, you've for 17 years you've been in the public school system. I'm wondering also, so you pointed to this a little bit, but how do you think that the sectors, the fields of the performing arts and education, what could they learn from each other, and how could they work together more to serve kids, to serve society at large, to just be a better force for good out there?
Well, I think my professor, if she sees this interview, I hope so, she might like this question. Because I really feel like the work that I want to do with my research and my dissertation, I really feel like that's what I'm really trying to answer. And I love that I've been a specialist for my career, meaning, I've been a phys ed teacher, I've been the dance teacher, I've been the theater teacher, I've been the Spanish teacher. I've taught ESL, and I say that because, but I've also taught like history briefly. But I've taught so many things, meaning that I see education from so many different perspectives. I was a paraprofessional. I was a day-to-day sub. I've been a department facilitator. In addition to being a teacher, I've been a coach. I've been very blessed and fortunate. I've had so many different roles in the field of education. Once again, I've experienced it from so many different lenses. And structure is great, but the structure we have is too rigid and it doesn't work for a lot of students. And I think in particular, different things that students deal with today when it comes to just like social anxiety, just different things that I'm sure probably peers experienced when I was in high school 20 plus years ago. But I feel like our society has evolved so much. And so it's on a different level. And so quite naturally, school needs to evolve and it needs to adapt. And it's trying to, but once again, we're talking about these old systems that are in place and, still feeling like we need to have, for high school students, they need to have 7 classes a day or, all these different things where realistically, and maybe this could be some of the benefits that have come out of COVID. And now many places are doing like a blended, some hybrid, remote, but learning that students learn differently and there need to be different models available. And that's what I think is so beautiful about the arts. And I really focus on the use of STEAM, which really focuses on how the art just throws like all the other content areas together. But it's so much more than that. I'm one that is kind of very anti-traditional, like Eurocentric curriculums. And so the work that I do is I teach an Afro-Indigenous cultural studies class at one of the high schools in Boston. And, it's community-based learning. We're learning about folk tales and, we share stories. They get to create things. And that's really what education is. So I'm really teaching them all their other subjects, but I'm combining it into this one class, so it's not being broken down to, oh, we're going to do history today. It's like, oh, but we're going to learn about the history of the Iwe people and the Ashanti people, and like we connect that to what does that mean today. So that's really where I'm trying to go. And it gives students a lot more ownership. And so I think that's something that the education world can learn from artists is like, take the reins off a little bit, let people explore to be who they are. And I see that particularly with students of color, where it's just the opposite. They're not allowed to explore, and everything is prescribed and told to them how to do it, when to do it. And that's something that I'm really trying to work against. And my classrooms, I feel like, have always worked against that model, even when I was in my 20s and had no idea what I was doing my first few years of teaching. But I think because that's just who I am as a person, I've always kind of brought that style,
Right.
To my classroom.
Right. Project based, and it's like changing the way that you approach the goal, right? It feels like you're speaking to, because human beings do things and they work towards things. They're motivated. They have to be, or they have something to work towards, right? So it's like, okay, we're gonna like give you this and go and see how you learn by doing, rather than like you're gonna sit in a chair and listen to me talk to you for an hour. Which is I'm not directly in that world, but from what I've seen, education is getting there, but it is slow.
It's hard because there's a pull, because there's still people who are in favor of the rigor, the standardized test, and for some reason they think if there's not some type of state or national standardized test to measure it, then it's not rigorous, which I would argue this is more rigorous, because when I give students projects to do, they'll have a rubric, but I don't lay out everything step by step, because I say, I want you to explore and I want you to be creative. And if I prescribe too much, then it's going to all end up being the same. And I mean, and I worked as I also work in higher academia as well. And I used to go into classrooms and do teacher observations, students getting their master's degrees, and students would do great work, but it would like everything ended up looking almost the same, because it was like so prescribed what the teacher wanted them to do, which I understand they were trying to be helpful, but I don't think in the long run you're helping them, because then they feel like they don't trust their own instinct and they're not willing to explore and maybe engage to the level that they really possibly could have if you just would have opened the door a little bit.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a tie to the arts there. It's like, I know my dad took me to see a performance once and I was like, well, what'd you think of it? He's like, I don't know dance. And I'm like, no. You have eyes and ears and a mind and a spirit. What did you think?
Right.
Yeah, and you see that, and like people are like, oh, I can't dance, I can't sing. Right? And I think it starts at that traditional educational structure of like, you're going to sit here and do math problems, and then many kids have trouble with that, and then it's this message of you're not enough. Versus you give students something to create for themselves, and inherently, most of the time, of course, there's exceptions, there comes a feeling of success from that, right? Feels like when they create something that they're interested in and that they can frankly do and accomplish. So I love it. I love it all. Yeah, so those are more sort of the formal questions I have. You alluded to it, but I would love for you to tell us what we can follow, what we can support, what we can look forward to from Danko.
Well, I'm glad that you asked. And this is also a project that you will be a part of.
Yeah,
which
I'm
very
excited
to have you, you're like, you've been there with us since the beginning, almost. And so the project is called Unity 2020 for Healing. And a dear friend of mine who we've been dancing, a dance friend that I've known from pretty much after I graduated and I came back to Massachusetts. We were dancing in Cambridge together. With Kelly Donovan dancers way back in the day. And we always seemed to find each other at the right time. And we found we kind of came together in the spring, and we just felt like we needed to just we needed to bring the joy to the people. It's been so scary, traumatic, so many unknowns. Some people, like their whole way of life has changed. And how are we able to bring like a sense of like calm and familiarity to people during a time when everything is crazy, which I think you alluded to my Movement for Motivation show that I started. And I started that as a way to keep me and my spirits and to keep me sane. And I also miss teaching my dance classes to my adult students, to my high school students. And it was a way for me to try to continue to be connected. And so it's a 2-part event that's going to happen. It kicks off November 27th, which is a Friday, so right after Turkey Day. It'll still be a holiday weekend, so we're going to have a 3-part healing workshop called The Oneness. And we're going to have a lot of great guest teachers, like I said, like healers, wellness specialists that will be helping us out with that. We'll also be creating a community dance as kind of part of the work and the healing process. And then the next night we have our big performance. So we have some of our friends that are going to be performing from New York, some of us Boston-based dancers, and then we have like a little youth celebratory fun dance party, and we're going to conclude things with kind of a fun informal Q&A, get to meet the artists, ask some questions, and we're excited. It's the first time I've ever hosted an event virtually, but we're very excited, and we just wanted to continue our work as artists and just trying to find a different way to connect with people. And normally Danko does an annual yearly show, and we're starting to really collaborate and connect with a lot of different artists in the community. And we just wanted to have a space where we can kind of celebrate life and try and, and just finding ways to bring everyone together.
Lord knows we need it these days.
Yes. So I hope I gave you a good response. And yeah, you guys can find us. We're Danko Productions 2 on the IG. We also have website page, FB page. We're around on the social media.
Put all the information people need. We'll post it all up.
So yes, we will.
Can engage and learn. All right. Well, that's all I have today. If you wanted to give any other parting words, go ahead. But otherwise,
just stay tuned, and we hope that you can join us for the show. It'll be a wonderful weekend of family fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, Katina. Everyone out there, vote, make your plan for vote. Got to make a plug for that.
Yes,
Please like, subscribe, comment, tell us what you think, and we will see you again. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.